A smile shone on my face. No wonder, as I sat looking at my beautiful young wife, Wendy. A 27-year-old beautiful woman, average height, slender. Without a doubt, she was gorgeous. So why do I smile when she cries, you ask? Well, I'll answer you. I was smiling because she was crying, and I will gladly explain to you exactly why. Listen carefully. It all started less than 6 months ago, or at least that's when I first felt the winds of change. Wendy and I were living in North London where I was working for a local firm of solicitors, having recently been promoted to partner. Ashley Burks and Scrummings? Old man Scrammings was about to retire, and Ashley and Burks were long gone. There were 3 other partners, and they, like me, were waiting for Scrummings to leave so we could move into the 20th century. How long it would take to move into the 21st, one could only guess. Yes, our firm was, to say the least, a traditional, old-fashioned enterprise. Wendy and I were very happy together. We had a nice house, 2 new cars, a Jaguar and a Porsche, and a membership in the local country club. The sex life was good. No, it was very good. And after 7 years of marriage, it seemed frequent enough for me. So there was nothing wrong with it? Not so, although I didn't know that until Thursday night. Derek, Wendy turned to me as we finished the last drops of wine. Don't you ever feel like we need a little more variety? Why? I replied, picking up the empty bottle. I thought you liked this Côte d'Aron as much as I did. No. It was one of our favorite wines, but I didn't know what she was talking about. I'm talking about sex, not wine, you damn fool, she giggled. Here's something I certainly hadn't expected. What's wrong with our sex life? I managed to ask as my initial shock passed. Oh, I don't know, Derek, she replied thoughtfully. Sometimes I just wonder. Having gotten me this far, she refused to talk about it further that evening and left me wondering. In fact, at that moment, she seemed quite promising to me. 2 evenings later, she brought it up again. But this time we really got to the point. Have you ever thought about making love to another woman? Wendy asked dreamily. Yes. That was all I said. And of course it was true. But the real reason for my brevity was that I didn't want to distract her from what she was doing. Anyone in particular? Your friend Gail is Mick Halle Berry's wife. I could go on. But that's certainly not what I meant. Well, maybe I meant it, maybe I didn't, but we were just joking, right? What about if you really could? She continued. Sure, not Halle Berry, but Gail is a real housekeeper. But what if you could? I suddenly came to my senses a little. What was my wife implying? You mean Mick's wife? Incredulously, I asked. Now that was a thought. God, what a thought. And if you'd seen Mick's wife, you'd know what I mean. This was getting very interesting. No, silly, Wendy laughed, ruining my fantasy. I don't mean anyone in particular. Just if the opportunity presents itself. Damn it, what was my sweet, formerly lovely wife getting at? Was she fantasizing about a threesome or something? Me, her, and who knows what magnificent creature. Damn it. Sorry to hear about Mick's wife, but let's go with the flow. Any takers? I asked. As casually as possible, trying desperately to cross Mick's wife's legs out of my imagination. Not really, she replied. Maybe a couple we could swap with or something. I was so absorbed in my daydreams that I almost didn't pay attention to her words. A good 3 evenings later, we sat watching TV. EastEnders. She liked it, but I wasn't so sure. Truth be told, I wasn't very focused. Have you thought about it? She asked suddenly. I think Ricky will get the girl, I replied, trying to remember what was happening on the screen in front of us. No, silly, she giggled. That's not that program. It's about spending time together. Us and another couple. What do you call it? Well, if that's what you really want, she said quite seriously. I might consider it. Maybe, but I'm not too sure. Wait a minute. Who's leading who on? Where did you get these ideas, Wendy? I asked. I didn't start it, she declared. I won't say I'm not intrigued by the idea, but, well, I don't know. At this point, I sincerely regretted not drinking so much earlier. I really shouldn't have finished the second bottle. Where the hell was all this going, and did I want to go there? One of my clients from work is into it. Holy shit, is that my wife talking? Stop it, shut up. But what a fool I am, what did I really say? Who's that, Wendy? Bloody stupid. And I actually meant, of course, what kind of wife he has. No, I didn't. That's not what I meant. Screw it. Yes, you did mean it. I was embarrassed. Then Wendy saw right through me and guessed what I was thinking. His wife, I think, is very beautiful, Wendy continued rather casually. But I wasn't thinking of them, but, well, maybe I don't know. My mind whirled around in my head. No, I thought about it for a few more seconds. No, Wendy, I said firmly. Fantasize about it all you want, but I really don't think we should go down that road. That's all I was doing, honey, just fantasizing. Hell, I knew from experience that every time she called me sweetie, she was up to something. From one thing flowed another. I hadn't yet explained that although I was a solicitor, my wife was a barrister solicitor and as such had spent her life in court unraveling people. She had a very analytical mind, was excellent at what she did and usually beat me in arguments. What Wendy wasn't so good at was long-term planning or strategy. And if it hadn't been for me, we probably never would have booked a summer vacation. No. My wife lived in the here and now, and always had. When we first met almost 9 years ago, Wendy was just a girl with a good reputation. Not that she was dating anyone, but once she laid eyes on some unsuspecting guy, he was more or less doomed. Yes, doomed to be in her bed, whether he planned it or not. Believe me, I can vouch for that and for the fact that such a fate was not horrible. However, I had never participated in any of the multi-partner sessions that Wendy was known to participate in, and it was one of those things in her past that I preferred not to dwell on too much. And I knew she had participated in them, but I didn't want to know exactly how many, and in any case, it was all in her past, before we'd even met. Sometimes I wondered if it was pure coincidence that I became her main boyfriend when she graduated, because that's when she completely changed. Maybe she suddenly matured, or maybe she realized that her chosen profession didn't allow for such reckless behavior. Either way, it was good for me. She settled down and became a perfect, faithful wife, never once giving me reason to doubt her. But that didn't mean I never thought about it. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a swanky bar in town waiting for James Damn Perry and his wife to show up. Yes, she talked me into at least talking to the couple about it. James apparently had his own business making Christmas cards and other sundries, and while it wasn't big, it must have made him a good income. But his wife, I didn't know anything about her, and Wendy wasn't very forthcoming. I'll be blunt, we didn't switch places that night, not by any means. We just met them for a drink. We were able to talk about it and even ask questions. But that was the end of it. But that doesn't mean I wasn't nervous, but it also doesn't mean I wasn't intrigued. I had already played the field a bit before meeting Wendy, certainly not as much as she had. But even so, the thought of having to travel a bit didn't give me a raging headache. To be honest, my thoughts were in a bit of a mess by then. As for Wendy, could a leopard change her spots? Heck, could she thus be telling me that she misses her former relationship but doesn't want to cheat on me? And what should I do in such a case? I couldn't escape the thought that I was in a quandary. Damned if I do and damned if I don't. Have pity on the poor leopard. Here they are, Wendy exclaimed, jumping to her feet and kissing the cheek of the boy who had just entered. We introduced ourselves. Wendy, Derek, James, and Tanya. Good Lord, Tanya. James was in his early 30s, probably the same age as me. Tanya was goddamn beautiful. She was no more than 20, the kind of face you could only dream about. This couple switched places? And why the hell would this fool want to switch places with a woman who looked like her? The evening passed pleasantly enough, although my tongue was a little slurred when I tried to talk to Tanya. I learned that James was a Spurs fan, and as an Arsenal fan, that didn't exactly endear me to him. However, we parted as friends, promising to meet again soon. You liked her, didn't you? The question coming from my wife seemed silly. It wasn't that I hadn't noticed the communication between her and James. Oh God, the next few days were difficult. Wendy gently nudged and encouraged, suggested and hinted, until finally the question came to a head. Are we going to do this or not? No, was my answer, as seductive as the delightful Tanya. Okay, she replied. Forget it. But she didn't, and frankly, neither did I. The following Tuesday, we sat in the same bar, waiting for the same beautiful couple. Nothing had been decided yet, but the possibility, however vague, still existed. We agreed to take our time, talk, explore, ask questions, walk away and think whatever. In my mind, it was just another meeting, though I admit I was tempted. When I saw Tanya again, I was very tempted indeed. She had long, dark, shiny hair, big, dreamy brown eyes, and a cute upturned nose. Tanya was about 5 feet 3 inches tall, and her gorgeous half-Asian looks could have been modeled for a magazine. I hadn't paid much attention to James the first time we met, and it was only now that I realized how attractive he could be to a woman like my wife. A little taller than me, a little broader in the shoulders than I was, and maybe some women would find him a little more attractive than I did. Bastard. If he thought he was going to get into my wife's pants, he had other things on his mind. We had a second drink, then a third, and I began to relax and feel more and more comfortable, talking to the delightful Tanya. I heard my wife giggle and looked over at the other couple, noting with surprise how close they were sitting to each other and how cozy they felt. I wondered if I should say something to them, but it seemed a bit rude since they weren't doing anything I would complain about if I were any other friend. A few more minutes passed, and Tanya nonchalantly put her hand on my leg, telling me some story about her time at school. Quite an innocent gesture, except that her hand was actually more than halfway up my thigh. I liked it a lot, liked it a hell of a lot, but my racing heart and dry throat warned me to be careful. So I glanced back at the other two to see if Wendy had noticed. I didn't feel like asking Tanya to remove her hand, but I didn't feel like encouraging the other two either. Nor did I need to. My mouth dropped open as I noted the change in them since I'd last watched them and saw that they were even closer than before. Wait. No, too fast. Too fast, and I wasn't ready for it. Wendy, James, I shouted, trying to contain my anger. I'm not sure about all of this. They both looked at each other in surprise, and Tanya took her hand off my leg. What's the matter, Derek? My wife asked. And the husky voice confirmed that she was enjoying what James was doing to her. What's up? I repeated. He's been probing you, Wendy. Heck, he's still doing it as we speak. So, Derek? She said, looking back at me. I don't mind it at all. In fact, I'm enjoying it. For heaven's sake, Wendy, I hissed at her. You can't let him do this to you. Why not? She asked lightly. Why not? Wasn't it pretty damn obvious why not? We hadn't agreed to this, and I hadn't consented to him groping her. We're in a public bar, Wendy, I reminded her, trying to keep my voice in check. This is not the place to argue about this. They both threw me a quick glance, and then Wendy turned and stared directly at me as if daring me to contradict her. You're right, Derek, she said finally. This isn't the place. I felt the tension drain out of me, thinking she'd come to her senses. But that was short-lived. Come on, James. My wife turned to the other man, smiling warmly at him. Let's take this somewhere else. I'll see you in the morning then, James stated, standing up and taking Wendy's hand. I beg your pardon, what? You and Tanya can take our place, Wendy added, and smiled at me as if it was settled. And we'll go back to James. Wait, I disagreed. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't know what I wanted. Wendy kissed my cheek and left me standing there like a fool. My brain had a hard time comprehending what I had heard, and I must have stood there with my mouth open in shock. I should have reacted differently, and then maybe things would have turned out differently. But maybe it wouldn't. Either way, I just stood there like an idiot, unable to do anything to stop what was happening. I watched as my wife gathered her things, hugged James, and turned to leave. Enjoy, Derek, she remarked lightly. I'll see you in the morning. I still wasn't sure if this was all happening, and events just piled up on top of me. I watched silently as my wife of 7 years walked out of the bar, chatting and giggling with bloody James, clinging to his arm like a limpet. What the hell had I done? Or didn't I do? He'd taken my wife out to entertain her, and I did nothing to stop it. So, Derek, you ready? A sweet voice beside me asked, as Tanya pressed herself even tighter against me. I was confused. Wendy and James disappeared from sight as soon as they rounded the corner. I looked at Tanya for any indication. I really shouldn't have done this. This was my last mistake, the fool that I was. How could I say no to a girl who looked just like Tanya? I smiled at Tanya, wanting to express my uncertainty about the whole thing. She smiled back at me, her deep brown eyes promising so much. But damn it, wasn't she just so damn beautiful? That bastard James even left me to pay the damn drink bill. An hour later, we were back at my house in bed. And really, what could I say? Having fun with Wendy was fantastic in my opinion, but Tanya, though young, took me to another level. How the hell would I ever meet Wendy again, knowing what I'd done and how good it had been? And how would I meet her knowing what she'd done? I worried about how good Wendy had been with this James guy, and if it could ever happen again for us. Though, truth be told, I wasn't thinking about that at that moment. Tanya left at 9 in the morning, saying she hoped we'd meet up soon, and Wendy came back at 9:30. If they were planning this, there couldn't have been a better time. It's a wonder why I didn't think of it at the time. I was just embarrassed when she walked in. Embarrassed at her maneuvering like that, embarrassed that I'd agreed to it so willingly, and not the least bit embarrassed at how much I'd enjoyed the whole thing. "How was your night?" Wendy asked hesitantly. "Good. How was yours?" "Good," she replied with a smirk. A few moments later, we were already laughing, and I realized with very mixed feelings that our lives would never be the same again. I tried not to show much impatience when Wendy informed me that she had tentatively arranged to meet with the couple in a week's time. When that day came, my wife informed me that she had arranged to have dinner with James and that she would meet him at the restaurant. I, on the other hand, was to meet Tanya at the bar where we first met. That was fine with me, because although I was looking forward to meeting the lovely Tanya, I wasn't too upset about not having to spend time with the guy who was entertaining my wife. "Derek will be at our house tonight, but you can go over to theirs in the meantime." Well, that was fair enough. Watching Wendy get ready for her date got me thinking. Sighing, I closed the door behind me and headed out on my own date with the beautiful Tanya. Life was certainly hard, but it could have been worse, couldn't it? Half an hour later, I was already sitting at the bar, sipping my beer and waiting for my date. I was looking forward to Tanya walking in and savoring the moment while all the male gazes in the place would be looking at her and envying me. I wondered what tight creation she would be wearing that evening and anticipated taking it off a little later. I had to admit that after 7 years of marriage, dating another beautiful girl was exciting. The time for our meeting came and went. Another half hour passed and I was starting to get anxious. My cell phone rang and I relaxed, figuring it was Tanya to tell me she was running a little late. "Hi, sweetie." Oops. It was Wendy calling me sweetie. "Bad news, I'm afraid, Derek. Tanya came home from work tonight in a bad mood and won't be able to make it in today." "Oh, shit. Where are you, Wendy?" I asked, trying hard not to give away my disappointment. "I'm with James," she replied. "He left before Tanya got home and she just called him to let him know she couldn't make it." "Bloody hell," I replied. "So what are you going to do, Wendy? Go back home?" There was an ominous silence on the other end. Such silence that I could hear my heart beating frantically. "Well, Wendy, what are you going to do?" I repeated. "Actually, Derek, I was planning on continuing my date with James. If that's okay with you, honey?" "No, that really didn't suit me. A swap is a swap, but..." Well, damn it, it wasn't fair, and that's exactly what I told her. "Please, Derek, be reasonable. I know this must upset you, but James just bought me dinner and we had such a nice time." "Well, I'm not Wendy," I replied. "I've never been thrilled about any of this, and now I've had enough." "Oh, please, Derek, just for one night." "No, Wendy," I answered her. "It's time to put an end to this. Listen, Derek, what if I don't spend the night with him? What if I just stay with him for the evening? I can't just pick up and leave him." I hadn't thought the question through too well, and what she said was reasonable. I suppose she should have at least stayed and finished her meal. "Okay," I replied reluctantly, "but I expect you home by 11. "Come on, Derek. I thought 2 or 3 hours from now." "No way, Wendy." "How about 1 o'clock then?" she suggested. "No later than 12, I heard myself say. We'll split the difference and call it 12:30. "What the hell is the difference?" "Okay, then I'll expect you home at 1:30 in the morning," I reluctantly agreed. "No, Derek," Wendy corrected me. "I'll expect you sometime after that time. Don't forget we had our own house this time." "Damn insolence. Go to his damn house," I shouted into the receiver. "Then there's no way I'll be back by 12:30, honey." God, that damn woman, I told you she could outsmart me in an argument. No wonder she's won so many cases in court. "Fine, then go to his damn house," I replied angrily. There was no way I was going to stick around the bar until it was safe to go back to my own house. "I'll see you around 2, honey," Wendy muttered quickly and left. Damn bitch, she dragged me into this and I imagined her sitting there with a smirk on her face. I could have called her back, but I didn't see the point. So she would be entertained by another man again tonight, and I would go home alone. It wasn't fair. What upset me the most? My wife getting into bed with another man, or not getting Tanya in return? That's a difficult question, and I didn't know the answer to it. Perhaps what upset me the most was the fact that Wendy chose to be with James that night rather than me. It was painful. I felt empty inside. Okay, I have no idea what time she came over since I was sound asleep. Of course, it wasn't the time she promised, but at least she was next to me in bed when I woke up. What time did you get in last night? I asked when she came to her senses. Oh, don't ask, was all she managed. I was tired. And why would you be? As if I didn't know. Oh, you better not ask that either, Wendy giggled mischievously. She thought it was funny, but I couldn't say I thought the same. I was really pissed off. I just didn't understand why I had let myself be dragged down this switch path. Okay, I really enjoyed spending time with Tanya, and it was like a dream come true. But risking our precious marriage? Risk ruining the special relationship I thought I had with my wife? No, it wasn't worth it. This had to be the last time. I got up and got dressed, and Wendy rolled over onto her back and fell asleep. I didn't see her until noon, when she jumped down the stairs like a teenager. What a lovely day, she sang out as she jumped up to me, hugged me, and kissed me on the lips. She was in a good mood, and I decided it was time to suggest that she finish our adventure. I've arranged to meet James next Tuesday, Wendy announced cheerfully, ahead of me. Oh, really? I could only mutter, my temper rising. I'm afraid Tanya's still not feeling very well, but maybe next time. No. What do you mean, no? My wife asked, raising her eyes in surprise. No means no, Wendy, I insisted. I'm not going to put up with this. But you agreed to it, Derek, she almost hissed. You're the one who suggested it. I took a few deep breaths, not wanting to respond with something I might regret. You're not going to date and have fun with bloody James, whatever his name is, and that's final. So how are you going to stop me? She asked, anger flashing in her eyes, just as it did in mine. Good question. How can I do that? Short of locking her up or guarding her 24 hours a day. I can't, but if you do, don't expect me to be here when you get back. The answer seemed measured, but Wendy looked at me like I'd declared war on France or something. You don't really mean it, do you? Try me, I replied. Wendy stood her ground, but I refused to back down, and we stood staring at each other with daggers for a while longer. Finally, she realized that she may have led me too far, and she relaxed, trying to calm me down. Okay, she said. I see where you're going with this. I don't think it's very fair to you. No. With those words, she shrugged and went off to make herself something to eat. But the thing was, she didn't understand my point of view at all. I may have won the battle, but I didn't seem to have won the war yet. Not the one with France, you understand? It was more serious than that. We hardly spoke for the rest of the day, but in the evening we got down to business. Finally, she sighed, thanked me for such a wonderful night, rolled over onto her back and fell asleep. Tanya is feeling better, Derek, my wife informed me a few days later. I expected her to add something to that statement, but she just went on about her business. I did the same, but nothing. How was I to know she wouldn't leave it at that? How about we agree on something next Tuesday? She asked, trying to speak casually. About what, for instance? I replied, playing dumb. Of course, that didn't fool her. If you want, you can have our house again, she continued, as if this generous offer really meant something. Is that what you really want, Wendy? I demanded, trying to keep my voice under control. It's what we both want, isn't it, honey? She replied immediately. We enjoyed it last time, so why not? I wondered if I should remind her that I hadn't enjoyed it at all last time. What's more, last time I stayed home alone while she had a blast. But what was the point of that? How about Wednesday instead of Tuesday? I said for no particular reason, just to feel awkward. No, she replied. It can only be Tuesday. It has to be Tuesday. Strange, very strange, but I decided not to argue, got up and left. Something wasn't right here. I didn't know what it was, but something didn't add up. Why was Wendy suddenly so willing to do this after 7 years of us being so happy? Why was she so willing to risk our marriage knowing full well that I wasn't committed at all? Why were our meetings always on a Tuesday? How did that creep James manage to marry a girl as beautiful as Tanya? And why did that idiot have to change? No, something didn't add up, and I was determined to find out what it was. Thanks to my connections, I had no trouble finding out where James Perry lived, and after discovering that it was only a few miles from home, I headed there the next afternoon. I wasn't sure what I was going to do and eventually found myself sitting in my Jag a few doors down from their house. It was a detached house on its own grounds and must have cost a tidy sum, so it didn't need the bumps. For almost an hour, no one appeared or left, and I was beginning to feel a bit of a fool. Then the front door opened and two children about 8 or 9 years old came out of the house. They played in the garden for a while, and then one shouted, "See you tomorrow," and disappeared down the road, while the other went back into the house. Quite normal, you might think, but not for me. How could a girl Tanya's age have a child that age? That's a good question, isn't it? While I was pondering this, a Ford Focus pulled up and a uniformed nurse got out. I didn't notice if she locked the car, but she immediately walked up to the house and went inside. What the hell was going on here? I wandered around some more, but nothing else happened, and I went back to work, still perplexed. There had to be an answer. Why was the nurse here and where had the baby come from? I was so confused that I could hardly concentrate on work and wandered aimlessly around the outer office, annoying everyone for no reason. I was being stupid, but there was no way I could get rid of this unpleasant feeling eating away at my insides. Eventually, I decided I was being too stupid and went back to my own office to try to finish some business. With great difficulty, I started flipping through the pages of the divorce case I was working on. The marriage had broken up, which both parties wanted, but they were arguing about child custody. And then it hit me. Very simple. The child was supposed to belong to James from a previous marriage, period. He had to divorce and then remarry Tanya, and the child would live with them. Didn't even have to live with them. The boy could just visit them. But the nurse, who the hell could she be? It took more than an hour before I found the answer to that question as well. Tanya was sick, wasn't she? Or was? Maybe a nurse had made a home visit to administer treatment to her. Weak, but it was the best I could come up with. Maybe I was worrying about nothing, but it wasn't surprising when my wife was acting so strange. So everything was fine, wasn't it? But if so, why was something inside me telling me that everything wasn't okay? One more check and I promised myself that I would relax and move on with my life. I called Tom Black. Tom was a private investigator that our company used from time to time, and it didn't seem strange to anyone that I asked him to run a simple check for me. He said he would have the information I needed by the next day, and I tried to forget about it and take the job with a little more success than before. Tom proved to be true to his word, and the next morning he emailed me what he had found by simply checking the public records. It's simple. James Perry, 34, businessman. Philip Perry, age 9, middle school student. Mary Perry, 32 years old, a nurse. And that's it. Everyone who was registered at this address. Damn it, what happened to Tanya? Bad or not, the nurse sure as hell wasn't going to look after her. The bloody nurse lived there, and she was James's wife. Bloody hell, by Tuesday night my head was spinning, and I couldn't come to any reasonable conclusion. Several times I thought about telling Wendy what I had found out, but if there was a reasonable explanation for it, I would look like a fool in everyone's eyes. Besides, the trust between us was already somewhat damaged, and if she found out I was checking up on her, it could be the last straw. No, I decided to go on a date and see what I could find out from Tanya herself before finding out about Wendy. I couldn't think of any other way to handle this. Provided Tanya showed up, of course, but the way things were shaping up, that wasn't too likely. Hey, Derek. Good to see you again. I looked up and there, resting a hand on my hip, stood Tanya, probably even more stunning than I remembered her. I quickly looked around the bar and noticed the envious looks of all the other guys in the bar, and at least at that moment I felt great. She looked beautiful and gifted me with a smile that melted my heart. It was those eyes. No, it was her smile. Hell, she was all of it. She was a dream come true. She was a little surprised when I suggested we stay for a bite to eat, but readily agreed, and we went to the table I had reserved. I had a few questions and wanted answers before this evening dragged on. Who are you? I asked once we were seated. Tanya, she laughed. After our last night together, surely you haven't forgotten me. Yes, Tanya, I continued. I know your name, but you certainly aren't James Perry's wife, are you? Tanya lost her smile, lowered her confident gaze, and visibly swallowed. I really caught her off guard with that comment. What do you mean, Derek? It was all she managed. Pretty weakly. I mean, Tanya, if that's really your name, then why is that bastard James swapping you for my wife even though you're not even married to him? Gotcha. Tanya tried to smirk, but seeing the look on my face decided against it. She looked around, trying to see if she could slip away, but I positioned her so she was trapped. I guess I'd better come clean, she finally suggested nervously. That's better, I replied, and waited to see what the hell was going on. Was Tanya his girlfriend? Maybe his sister-in-law? Their neighbor? I had no idea. Listen, Derek, she began. You're a really nice guy, and I'm sorry I fooled you a little bit. I nodded and waited for her to continue while she took a big breath. They paid me to do it, Tanya finally muttered. They paid you, I almost shouted at her. They paid you to go out with me. What kind of woman are you, for God's sake? A woman who gets paid to have fun with strange men, she whispered back, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Derek, really sorry. Oh shit, now she caught my gaze. You bloodthirsty prostitute, I shouted at her, forgetting we were in a public place. Not so loud, please, Derek, Tanya begged me, looking around with a frightened expression on her face. I prefer escort to prostitute, but it's really the same thing. Suddenly it was like it hit me. James had paid that damn prostitute to play the role of his wife, and he was entertaining mine. What a bastard. What the hell is Wendy going to say when she finds out what he did? I demanded. Stupid question. I was still not thinking straight. This was even worse than I thought. I think she already knows everything, Derek, Tanya told me uncertainly. She's the one who called me to arrange a time. Oh no, surely there must be some mistake here. But I knew right away that there wasn't. I hope she wasn't the one who paid you, I muttered pathetically, unable to find anything else to say. No, Derek, Tanya tried to assure me. It was the guys who paid both times. I was so damn upset I almost let her words pass my ears, and when I looked up at her, she covered her mouth with her hand, realizing her mistake. She'd missed something else. Guys? I asked. You mean guys plural? Tanya just nodded without opening her mouth. I took a slow, deep breath to calm myself down before I did something I would regret later. I wasn't going to hit her or anything, but I needed to think hard. Explain. I decided that was enough and waited. There are 3 of them, Derek, she continued. James, Mike, and Terry. Terry was once a client of mine. That's how they know me. I sat in silence, shaking my head. Sorry, Tanya said. Thanks for nothing. I really enjoyed my first time with Derek, Tanya continued. You're a really nice guy, and it wasn't like other dates I usually have. You took such care that I enjoyed it too, but when I was offered to do it again next Tuesday, I declined because I didn't want to cheat on you after meeting you. Well, that explained why she didn't show up for the second date, didn't it? Why I sat there all night, my stomach churning at the thought of some other guy entertaining my wife. Turned down a goddamn hooker. And then it hit me. She wasn't being entertained by some other guy. There were 3 of them. I shuddered as I realized that at this very moment she was doing the same thing again. Resting my head on my hands, I fought the urge to burst into tears. I could barely control my trembling hands, could barely control my reaction. I'm sorry, Tanya whispered, gently stroking the back of my head. Of course, I should have brushed her off, but it calmed me down and relaxed me a little. So why are you here this time? I asked, pushing the horrible vision out of my mind. They offered me extra money, Derek, Tanya replied. Besides, when I thought about it, I liked the idea of seeing you again. So I wasn't turned down by a prostitute. I'm not sure that helped, though. We talked some more, and Tanya willingly told me everything she knew. I couldn't believe I was sitting there calmly taking it all in, although my eyes misted up a few times and I didn't resist when Tanya took my hand in hers and squeezed it. Did I really know my wife? Did I even know her at all? Does a leopard change its spots? The cow had played me for a fool, and I would have my revenge. I didn't know how, but I would work at it. Meanwhile, as far as I was concerned, my marriage was over. It was dead as a doornail. But at that moment, there was nothing I could do about it, so what could I do? Then I looked at Tanya. God, she was so beautiful. Why not? I've always been a bit of a pragmatist. Why don't we go to my place then? I suggested. Love Derek, she smiled back at me. So we did. It helped, really helped. Wendy returned early the next morning, looking tired but full of the joys of spring. Now, of course, I understood why. But I didn't just want a divorce, an easy parting. I wanted revenge, and revenge on all 4 of us. When she kissed me, I turned my cheek to her, but not enough to alarm her. She would have time for that later. She looked at me. waiting to see what I would say. Maybe tell her what a good time I had or ask her the same question. I just turned away and said nothing. Let the bitch deal with whatever was going on in my head. I already had an idea in my head, but I needed to figure out where they were all meeting. Obviously not at James's house, since it was unlikely his wife would agree to that, and I realized it always had to be Tuesday, since the three of them had to have an excuse to get out of the house that evening. Bowling, drinking, whatever. I needed someone's help too. Someone who knew them and could find out the information I needed. Who better than Tanya? Besides, I really enjoyed spending both evenings with her, and the feeling was mutual. I learned a lot about her and her situation, as well as the fact that she had only been working as an escort for 3 months. How many liaisons, or dates as she called them, she had had in that time I didn't know, nor was I interested. Tanya was halfway through university studying fashion design when she seriously ran out of money. The situation was not a new one, but when one is as attractive as she undoubtedly was, the first bar she found work in happily accepted her. Soon she was working behind the bar at a nightclub where the pay was better, and the skimpier and more revealing her outfit, the more tips she received. She laughed, admitting to me that she enjoyed it very much, and teased the men who tried to peek into her increasingly revealing tops. One thing led to another, and soon she was persuaded to try pole dancing, which she immediately excelled at. And believe me, I could see why. Soon, clients started asking her out on dates, and she learned how much money could be made in an evening's work. She managed to rationalize her behavior, but she ended up dropping out of school anyway, which by the time we met she began to regret. So we were left alone. And parting, Tanya asked when we could meet again, and payment was out of the question. I wondered if I was jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Tanya was happy to help me, and within a couple days I knew that the four of them, Wendy and her three lovers, were meeting on Tuesdays at the Paramore Hotel on the other side of town. At least her lovers weren't skinheads, since that hotel was the most expensive for miles. Though the cost of hiring Tanya should have told me that by now. No, not only that, I even knew the room number they always used, and that it was a corner room on the second floor next to the fire escape. Perhaps they were counting on me rushing up to them, confronting them, and leaving them an escape route. That didn't happen, but that didn't mean they weren't in for a surprise, and I could hardly wait until the following Tuesday. I wouldn't need Tanya that night for what I had planned, so I simply told Wendy I was going out of town on business. "What are you going to do, honey, while I'm gone?" I innocently asked. "Oh, I'll probably stay home," she replied. "Or maybe go to a movie with one of the girls from work." "Oh yeah, you bet." But the look in that bitch's eyes said otherwise. At 8:30, I was in the lobby of the Paramore Hotel with a newspaper in hand in case I needed to hide. I was finishing my second mug of beer when I spotted Wendy walking down to the large spiral staircase in high heels, wearing a fashionable short tight skirt, an expensive blouse, and, as far as I could make out, little else. Very stylish. I had to say she looked pretty good, and a lump formed in my throat at the thought of how she was tricking me. How she'd been deceiving me for who knows how long. If this night went as planned, it was unlikely we'd ever sleep in the same bed again, and I regretted for a moment that we'd made so little love in the past few weeks. Oh well. "Wendy," I heard someone's voice, and I turned around and smiled radiantly at some guy I'd never seen before. I guessed it had to be either Mike or Terry. "Hi, Terry," Wendy echoed, confirming my thoughts. "Aren't Mike and James with you?" "They're already there," he reported, lowering his voice as he approached her. Then he put his arm around her and pulled her to him. "Just entertainment, right? If it's just entertainment, then I'd like to see what affection is. If there was anything left in my heart, it would burst." My eyes were far from the only ones following them as she walked with him, girlishly giggling at something he said. I think most of the men watching couldn't help but feel a rush of jealousy, knowing full well what was in store for them. I, on the other hand, felt a hollow feeling in my stomach. Cow, bitch, my damn cheating wife, however. There were other eyes that I hoped were watching this loving embrace, though no matter how many times I looked around, I couldn't figure out who it could have been. And another 10 minutes passed and they gave the game away, even if I was the only one who noticed it. 3 men, all of fairly large build, rose from their seats and walked up to the front desk. They were joined by a woman who approached from the other side and seemed to be in charge here. I watched carefully through the paper as the woman showed the pretty girl behind the counter something she pulled out of her jacket, and the girl looked scared. The woman said a few words, and the pretty girl disappeared through the doorway behind the counter, only to return almost immediately with an older man of very respectable appearance. The manager, perhaps? Or his number two? A few more words, and the manager, quite obviously, handed over the key and nodded to the woman. For me, all this was happening before my eyes, though I doubt very much if anyone else in the hotel noticed what game was being played. It was only when two uniformed police officers appeared outside and stood at the entrance that a few people looked up. But even then, their interest was piqued. Little did they realize that their interest would increase dramatically. Even I didn't realize how much it would jump. The four plainclothes policemen walked leisurely toward the front staircase, careful not to attract unnecessary attention. They climbed the steps easily and disappeared from sight. I sat there, holding my breath, wondering how this was going to turn out, whether I had gone too far and whether I would get into trouble myself. Then silence. Then turmoil. The police had received information that there were regular parties at the hotel and that prostitution was also taking place there. The cops were particularly interested in the names of two of the participants, one in particular who was not a great friend of theirs. Who exactly called the police, I honestly don't know, although I must admit I knew in advance what it would be about. It's convenient to be a lawyer and have connections in such low circles. I enjoyed watching my cheating wife being led around the hotel, hopefully in handcuffs and under arrest. Although I realized that I would be lucky if this wish came true, and that the charges were unlikely to be sustained, it was her humiliation that I craved as revenge. I really wanted to tell her about her infidelity. Of course, it didn't work out that way. It didn't work out that way. But what did happen was bloody marvelous, and beyond my wildest dreams, neither I, nor Tanya, nor anyone else knew that they'd rented not one room, but two. Whether it was so that one of them would have another room to rest in between sessions, or so that the noise of their entertainment would not disturb the other guests, I don't know. When the police entered the room, surprising the four intruders, two of them clearly panicked. One of them was quickly grabbed, but Wendy, bless her little white cotton socks, managed to slip out into another room before she was caught. From there, she sprinted out into the hallway and dashed down the fire escape. It wasn't until she was halfway across the parking lot and felt sharp rocks under her feet that she must have realized she was without clothes. What a laugh. Everyone in the waiting room watched in amazement as this beautiful young blonde swept past the large windows. Two uniformed police officers automatically rushed in pursuit, but Wendy flinched as she realized her predicament. I couldn't help but smile as I watched my traitor being led back to the hotel, her hands cuffed together while her captors made no attempt to cover her modesty. She lowered her head in shame and embarrassment, unable to cover her body, and visibly flinched at the flashes as various members of the public took the opportunity to photograph this incredible, almost unthinkable scene. Thanks to whoever invented the cell phone camera. Wendy walked past me no more than 10 feet away, so distraught that she was completely oblivious to my presence, and burst into tears. It was time for me to disappear. Never in my wildest dreams had I expected things to work out so well. On the top floor. Of course, Wendy was never charged with anything, although Terry was found to have a small amount of illegal substances and was eventually sentenced to probation. He wasn't jailed, but as he was a candidate for local MP, it certainly put a crimp in his future plans and career. I suspect it may also have ended his marriage. James's wife filed for divorce and took him to the cleaners. It seems he was the junior in the scheme who was bought by the other two to do the dirty work of deceiving me. I won't say anything more than that, but turns out Mike was probably the ringleader. Turns out he and Wendy had probably been having an affair for months. He's the one who introduced two of his buddies to Wendy, and he's the one who got the idea to trick me into sharing my wife with them. And how he did it, you're probably wondering. Well, Mike, that is, District Judge Michael St. John Milesworth, got off pretty badly. The press, to put it mildly, made a meal out of it. Several people at the hotel who took the pictures must have contacted the newspapers, and although I didn't stop to look, pictures of him being pathetically led out of the hotel with handcuffs on his hands appeared, and they made the front page of just about every newspaper in the country. The fact that my beloved wife was at this time assisting Silk from her room in the trial, with Milesworth presiding, helped push the boundaries somewhat, and the story was mulled over for days. Questions were asked in the House, and the Prime Minister himself became involved in the scandal, demanding the resignation of a prominent judge on a television show A few days later, he was finished, and although he may not have broken any laws as such, Mike will never be able to work in the legal profession again. I don't know what exactly happened to him, but he just disappeared from sight. Poor guy? I guess not. Well, that's it. Oh no, I forgot about my wonderful wife, didn't I? Hello, darling. I greeted her on the phone when I called her the day after the incident. Hi, Derek, Wendy replied, sounding rather depressed, though I pretended not to notice it. Where are you? I'm still in Paris, love, I lied, sitting in a pub no more than 5 miles from our house. Sorry, but I'm going to be stuck here for a couple more days. Can't you come home right away, honey? She pleaded, but I told her that wasn't possible, that she would have to wait a little longer. Have you read the papers, darling? She asked, her voice trembling visibly. I haven't seen a single English newspaper on sale. I lied again. Why? No reason, dear, Wendy continued. What about the television? No, Wendy, I continued to tease her. I've been too busy. Why did something interesting happen at home? No, Derek, nothing special. Well, could you please come home right away? Please, darling, we need to talk. As soon as I finish what I came to do, darling, I promised. Good, she continued. Please, Derek, don't forget that I love you. No matter what you hear, don't forget that you're the only one I love. I sensed that Wendy was close to tears, but I preferred to pretend I didn't notice it. I did, however, catch her odd remark. Well, if you love me so much, honey, don't be tempted to get together with that creep James while I'm gone, okay? All that was heard on the other end of the wire was some kind of gasping sound. I really wanted to talk to you before I left, honey, I continued. I really don't like the business you've gotten us into, and I think we should stop before it ruins our marriage. Okay, she muttered in response, if that's what you want. I never said that, but I was really worried that you might be tempted to continue your relationship with Wendy, and I just couldn't stand it. It would have been the end of our marriage. Oh, Derek, she exclaimed, and this time I heard her sobs. Love you, Wendy. I ended our little conversation with a promise I had no intention of keeping. I'll see you in a couple days when I get back. A sob was heard, which I chose to ignore. I sat for a few moments, reflecting on our conversation, then picked up my pint and took a sip. Unable to resist, I reached for the newspaper I'd been reading before Wendy's call. On the front page was a pretty clear picture of my wife, tears streaming down her face as the police officers led her through the hotel lobby. As I said, the paper had been out for several days, and for most of the week my wife's picture was scattered everywhere. As soon as one publication took the risk of omitting an individual star, all the others followed, and this gave them an incentive to publish the entire series of photos again. Someone even managed to capture her as she whizzed across the parking lot, with no clothes on. The internet people made a meal out of it. I believe she received an offer from Playboy to pose, but then again, it could have just been a fairy tale, and I never got confirmation as we never met again for a friendly chat. Of course, she lost her job and became a paralegal at some obscure firm up north. I finalized our divorce myself, and that's when I saw her crying in court as the judge. Not Mike, of course, but Mike tore her apart. The ruling was not in her favor. Well, that's the end of my little story, which I hope you enjoyed. I have to go now because I have a hot date with a very attractive girl who is about to graduate with a degree in fashion design. She is said to have a great future in the industry and has long since left her other career. Whether Tanya and I will work something out in the end, no one knows. I certainly hope so. I'm a glutton, though. The end. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.